All right, time to do one final entry in this, the Gamer's Diaries of the Wind Waker. Now, I'm going to do you guys a very solid favor. We all have a consensus that this is the most hated part nearly in any Zelda game ever, the Triforce Shard questline, where you have to collect 8 different shards of Triforce. Yeah, and it's just repetitive. Now, luckily in the HD version, they did water this down a ton. Now you only had to get like 3 charts, and the rest you could find, like, you didn't find the chart on board the ghost ship, you actually found a piece of the Triforce on board the ghost ship. But coming back to Hyrule, obviously you have to face down 2 Dark Nuts because, well, what happens is Ganondorf was already beaten to the punch. Now, you know what I was talking about? This is like basically leaving yourself open for the final act to take place when you finally leave. Like, you're giving Ganondorf plenty of time to get down to the underworld, which he definitely probably has access to. And they actually allude to that later on in the game, how he was able to get down beneath Hyrule and the Forsaken Fortress. But obviously, Ganondorf captures Princess Zelda, a.k.a. Tetra, brings him over to the tower, and you have to find your way over to the tower for one final push at the end of the game. And I like how the final dungeon in this actually took place at the very end, like how the final dungeon actually like comes into Hyrule. You actually have to go into the old land and then solve the problem through there. It just adds a whole nice twist to it. But obviously it does follow some very similar Ocarina of Time-esque things in the very beginning, where you have to go through 4 different rooms, even though in the Ocarina of Time it was 6, but this one it was 4. Now, honestly, why they didn't include the 3rd and 4th boss, they just did 1, 2, and 4, 5, and 6, that's beyond me. But you do have to face Goma, you have to face that flower, you have to face the big giant ghost, and then you have to face Mulgara, and I don't even remember their names half the time, because all I can remember is Goma, because Goma's in every game, and then Mulgara is one of the most memorable bosses. Like, literally a diamond in the rough if you look at this game in a negative light. But I call this a final part of the game the Tale of 3 Ganons right now for a reason, because you have to face Phantom Ganon again, then you have to face Puppet Ganon, and then you have to go ahead and then face Ganondorf. Now, going on with Phantom Ganon, I remember I talked about how he was one of the coolest notes in the writing of the script because you unlock Ganondorf's powers. So now Phantom Ganon is at full access with Ganondorf. He's actually a presence that looms around Ganondorf the entire time. But this time you actually have to face him in his maze. You kind of finally get to come over to his home turf, and you get that funky music that actually plays while you fight him. And as you face him down, you get to the end of his maze, and then you get the light arrows. Now, here's the thing I actually have to say about the light arrows. They are the most overpowered weapon I have ever seen in any Legend of Zelda game. Like, this rendition of the light arrows is way more hardcore than anything I could have ever faced. But the only thing is, it basically makes Phantom Ganon go out with a whimper instead of a bang, you know, because it was so sudden. Like, honestly, if you've ever seen a close to Mortal Kombat brutality that ever happened to a Legend of Zelda boss, it was this one. And obviously, look, Phantom Ganon's very dark, and then you have the light arrows, but this is supposed to be a continuation of Ocarina of Time. I guarantee you, if you had the light arrows by the time you face Phantom Ganon in Ocarina of Time, I don't think it would instantaneously just shut his lights down, but if you look at the timeline in which this takes place, that didn't really line up. So, hey, you never know. Maybe there's some properties in them. But I just find it weird how Phantom Ganon housed the weapon that defeats him in his own thing, or how Ganondorf would even consider that putting in. So when I went back in the old videos and I said that the good guys had really good writing, but the bad guys had really good writing, but the good guys did not so much. Now, I think the bad guys just had some really dumb moments too, like the lack of common sense, just when you look at this game through that, is exactly that. Why would I stand next to the weapon at all times that could just end me in 2 seconds? It never occurred to Ganondorf, why don't I just heave-ho this the entire time? Because that light arrow is the only thing that destroys Puppet Ganon, which I'm actually going to get onto next. And let me tell you something, the first 2 phases of Puppet Ganon were awesome, but I have an issue with that snake phase. I don't know if it was a gamer glitch, but when it is rolling around, it is so hard to hit that tail with the light arrows. Could you imagine how awesome that would have been for Ganondorf had he just not given the light arrows out at all? Even if Link made it out of that endless limbo he would have been in with Phantom Ganon, how impossible the battle with Puppet Ganon would have been. I'm just saying, make it make sense. But after you beat Puppet Ganon, then you have to do one final climb to the final boss of Ganondorf. And you know what? He gives a monologue that puts his character into such perfection. Like, this is the one part in the game that video essayers all over the internet buzzed about, how he is stuck in the past and he really doesn't care about the water world. He cares about the land of Hyrule, the land that got buried, because that's the land he has always wanted. So you can tell he's always just wanted to get back under and get back to the old ways. And you know, the crazy part is that he actually was going to free up from this post-apocalyptic world. This is the one whole backwards thing that I don't get, you know, that obviously they had to wash away and everything like that. Do you really want... I get the point that they're going with this video game, that, you know, sometimes you have to let go of the old and embrace the new, but when the new is a post-apocalyptic, like, water world with very few bodies of land left. I mean, if you go out into space and you look at that globe, it's going to be mostly blue. You know, let's be real. So Ganondorf would have probably done the right thing, where there probably would have been more resources to go around. Whereas if you're on those islands, how do I put this? It just kind of seems like, yeah, like there would be more land, resources, everything pretty much. But I was along for the ride for this, and I just had to appreciate the boss battle for what it was. Obviously, 3 phases, and it was good. It just kind of showed that Zelda was active and helping out Link this time rather than just sitting on the sidelines. Like, that's actually what I like about some of these newer games, is when it comes to Zelda, she actually has a bigger part to play. Now, obviously, does it, you know, take away from Link a little bit, being the guy that one-on-one faces Ganondorf? Yes, but it is The Legend of Zelda, and you got to make Zelda legendary. If she's just in distress the whole time, then not much of a legend. But this follows a very similar Twilight Princess-esque thing. At the very end, you actually do deal a deadly blow to Ganondorf with the Master Sword, to the point where it is the end of him. It is his finale. Like, you could tell when they put together the 3 split timelines of the Zelda universe, this makes sense that this is the spot where Ganondorf is finished. He is unalived on this timeline. And you want to know something? I actually gotta say, it's pretty crazy. He just kind of goes out, says one thing, and turns to stone. And I don't know. I don't think the stone rendition looks really good. In fact, honestly, it makes his butt look pretty big. But they have to learn to let go of Hyrule, and the king is voluntarily drowning with his own kingdom. And honestly, this was a very stoic way that he wanted to go out. You form a bond with this guy. You think he's a talking ship, the King of Red Lions, but he's with you the whole time, and he's here to help you, you know, finish what he wanted finished a long time ago. Obviously, he dragged you in a little bit, but you had a growth opportunity. So to say goodbye to him like this is just all out hardcore. Like, this actually is a sad note as far as Zelda storytelling goes. But you guys wake up on the surface, and like I said, the coolest pirates ever with the most humanitarian practices. Obviously, this is completely separate from the Bartholomew Roberts golden age of piracy. These guys come and find you at exactly the time. So obviously, yeah. And also, I forgot to really cover one thing, the whole portal between the surface world and the land of Hyrule. That was in the Phantom Ganon's thing, but, you know, I got so caught up in the way that this game wrapped up that I kind of overlooked that, but it actually does make sense when it all comes together with that portal. But overall, this was a very heartwarming game at the end, and you know what? I think that with all of its flaws, it does have some value to it. Now, is it watered down, literally and figuratively, pun intended? Yeah, I was actually going to get into that in the next video. But the tale they told this time just was all out fun to watch and replay and revisit. And obviously, this was the one game I kind of forgot about from my childhood that I never really cared to revisit. But I'm glad I cared enough to revisit it now, because seeing what it is that they spun and how it all came together, even though there's a lot of backwardsness in the script that I saw, like why would you want to keep the ocean world when you can open up everything? Yeah, obviously, yeah. You know what? I'm going to go back and contradict myself. Ganondorf would have ruled Hyrule. But I think that honestly, if the king wanted to part the seas and then make it under his rule, it would be pretty different. You didn't have to drown the city straight up. Like, yeah, like I said, the whole game is saying move forward, don't look back. But when you actually had a lot more land to play around with in the past, I mean, that could have been used in a lot of different ways to re-expand on communities and everything like that, because everything in this map is so scattered. But you know what? I digress. What I am probably going to do is talk about that in my finale review. That's not going to be technically an episode of what I'm thinking while I'm playing through this game. But thank you guys very much for this 7-part series where I kind of just drone on about games from the past. And hey, it depends on where I go with this. I might actually try to do a different one for a different Zelda. I'm thinking Twilight Princess next, because I have mentioned that before, and honestly I would love to revisit that one more than the Wind Waker a little bit. But yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out, and thank you guys very much for sticking with me and listening to just another generic gamer's response to a video game. Peace out.